And so thank you all for tuning in today. I think this is a great timing for this topic, career resilience, and we're thrilled to have Dr. Vic Babarda, who many of you might know of already. He is currently the director of the CU Anschutz Center for Combat Research and director of the CU Triad Research Colorado here at the university. He's vice chair of strategy and growth for the Department of Emergency Medicine and a tenured professor of emergency medicine, toxicology, and pharmacology. He is actively practicing emergency physician and medical toxologist with over 180 publications and several large grants. He's a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, which is just amazing on top of all of that, and a senior leader at the U.S. Air Force 59th Medical Wing. And he's also in the office of, he's the Office of Chief Scientist there. And 14 years of active duty service, including 4 combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So knows a lot about career resilience, and thrilled to have him. So let him go ahead and start.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to this. It's a short talk. It's about 35, 40 minutes, but happy to take questions after. I wanted to keep it pretty focused. So I'm gonna, I've gotten used to Zoom about 12 hours a day. So I think I've got this down. I'm gonna share these slides, and actually I'm gonna share a couple of videos, which I think will work. And if it doesn't, just, pardon me while I make a couple of changes. So I'll pull these up, and we'll get started. And okay, let me make sure that works. Let me just back out for a second. Okay. Perfect. So everyone can, just to be sure, just to audio check, everyone can see these slides, maybe see me, and can hear me okay?
Yeah,
perfect.
We can hear
Great.
you good.
That's awesome. Thanks for the thumbs up and the feedback. So good. So I'm glad to give this talk. Happy to do this. I've had a lot of opportunities for resilience, and I'll tell you some things. What I really want you to do is, I don't want you to take any notes. I want you to just take it in. And I'll talk about resilience. I know Nan's going to record this as well. I'm happy to go back. She already introduced me, so I'm not going to even talk about what I do here, but I will kind of jump right in with a story. So I'm an emergency physician, and when I started after residency, I know the audience here is a group of folks who are PhD scientists, physicians, almost all in research areas. This is who, it's hard to give this talk and I got no feedback. Unfortunately, we're supposed to do it in person, so I'll pretend I'll hear some feedback and as we go through, and laugh at my jokes, which some of them are good. So this was the show that was ER. I was an emergency physician. I thought I could, I was the John Stamos of emergency medicine at the time. And as the show came out, actually, it was more like the Michael Gallant, who was actually the Army physician, emergency physician that came onto the show. He's African-American who came on the show and was there. And actually, I think I could have been more like, it was more like Owen Hunt, who was the Army Army surgeon who was on Grey's Anatomy, who was around the time after I finished training. Or more importantly, maybe more like Rob Lowe, who was the Army emergency physician on Code Black. So for some reason, all of these shows had some Army ER doc or surgeon that came on there, and I kind of pretended to be those early on in my training, though I'm not as nearly as cool as they were. Right around the start of my academic career, I just finished fellowship. Actually, I did my fellowship here in Colorado, but had left for almost 15 years until recently came back. But I had finished my training and fellowship to kind of get where a lot of folks of you, men and women, are. I had my first small grant, a little seed grant of $10,000. I had about 5 publications after fellowship, which I thought was decent, or actually into fellowship, 10 presentations. I thought I was doing good. So I was then looking for my academic career to begin, looking for my next research funding, trying to figure out my protected time plan for my next big New England Journal publication, which came many years later, and we were all set. But but this story is around resilience and adversity and uncertainty. And so as I finished fellowship, this happened to me. So I didn't plan this. I knew I had to serve the military, but I didn't realize we were going to have a war, and I was going to spend several years not in America trying to take care of patients who were injured. So this is the Joint Base Balad, Iraq. So I just finished fellowship, and a few months later landed here, and then again in Afghanistan. And I went from being a fellow to running one of the busiest trauma centers since the Vietnam War. This is essentially the level 1 trauma center. You see in the middle that tent with the Red Cross, and that sign that says ER. Through those doors, the open doors and the white sign, 2 presidents, 2 vice presidents, 3 SecDefs, several cabinet members, several congressmen and women have come through that door. And I got the chance to meet and shake hands with several of those and talk to them one-on-one about what we were doing. And someday there'll be a movie about this. That's already been placed in the Smithsonian Museum. We worked with one of the congressmen to take this ER several years ago and put it in DC and Smithsonian, because more lives have been lost in this hospital since the Vietnam War. But a lot of folks who are emergency physicians, trauma surgeons, anesthesiologists, psychiatrists, neurologists have come through this that were in the military. So we always say it's a genesis of the innovation of combat casualty care and the foundation of the implications for civilian practice. And that was there several years ago. And they were really born the concept at the time of, we don't read textbooks, we write them. And we did, for mass casualty and burn care, resuscitation, TBI, suicide. Those folks are now disseminated across the US at UAB, chair of surgery at Hopkins, chair of orthopedics at Cleveland Clinic, University of Washington, UCSF, and a few of those here. And they all came through that. And all did not plan to, and through resilience in their careers and dealing with adversity, that's where they are now. But this is kind of where a lot of that started. In particular, I just want to talk about one day there that was interesting for me. So this was September 29, 2005. This is one of many days, and this is really a day of unpredictability. So interesting enough, the Associated Press was there. So these are photos by the AP. They took this photo and a couple of others as well and shared it. And so at this time, it was this day in the afternoon, there was the largest mass casualty in the history of Balad, Iraq. So over 100 casualties we saw that day. And just to remember, just a few months ago, I finished fellowship. I was going into my academic career and trying to find federal funding, and I'm taking care of 100 casualties. This is the one of them that came through urgently from the helipad into our tent hospital that we were there. I was leading that tent response, and we took care of these patients for hours and hours and hours. And so this is exactly the picture inside the tent. At the time, it was memorialized and produced actually in that Smithsonian that I mentioned as well. Matt Senna, who's the one in red, who's a trauma surgeon at UC Davis, who's there now. The gentleman in black on the right is Jim Keeney, who is a orthopedic surgeon at Wash U now, one of the division directors there. So this was quite a bit of adversity we did deal with and didn't anticipate. And to add to that, to add to this uncertainty and adversity, on this day, our neurosurgeon just got shot through the tent. We had an RPG that hit one of our nurses in the chest and killed her about 2 days prior. And then our respiratory therapist, who was a good friend, this is his 3rd deployment, had shot himself and killed himself just recently. So these are resilient events that I had never known or anticipated in my life. And though even today, when I don't get that grant, I get that paper, I think back and reflect on those times and mentored many folks, nurses, doctors, men and women through those periods as well. So this 24-hour period taught me a lot about gratitude, grit, resilience, and some lessons I'll tell you about in over hundreds of days just like this every day over 14 years I was active duty. So now in a different position. I came here about 3 or 4 years ago. I love my job here. I call it the Hall of Justice. And I get to work with super friends, as I say, like Dr. Rand Libby, who I think many of you know, who works with the center, Dr. Gende, does a lot of clinical research, and then my chair, Rich Zane. I saw Super Friends because it's, I grew up watching the Hall of Justice and Super Friends, so Wonder Woman and Superman, and wanted to be one of those types of heroes. I feel like that when I work here, but more importantly, every day, as you do, I deal with these adversity, uncertainty, changing priorities, like budget cuts, a pandemic, funding priorities that change, and try and turn those into opportunities. Trying to find the right tribe and culture for me, trying to learn where I can pivot or evolve to move them up my career. Well, I've learned to fail a number of times, but yet to recharge what I need to get done. And a good example of this is how I ended up giving this presentation, working with Dr. Libby. She put together a wonderful course with the help of Judy and others, Dr. Reagan Steiner, which is the Research Management and Leadership course. And this is a snapshot. We're videoing this. It's online. It's available. And it was just tweeted out again by the CCTSI who helped with it. And because I got to work with her, she's amazing, I got to actually be able to give these thoughts today to share with you how we every day help folks through their career and building their resilience. So this is my disclosure as we kind of get into the meat of the talk. So we have several NIH grants, several DoD grants, and I'm not going to say anything hopefully very controversial. I do need to say, since my part-time role as the Air Force this is my opinions, not the government, DoD, U.S. Air Force, or really for University of Colorado either. So I'll talk about 4 things. And these 4 things I think are very important for career resilience and kind of bouncing back from these things. Now, if you go look at this, you'll find on the online articles of 10 to 5 things to focus on. You'll find books of 200 pages. I'll get you there in about 35, 40 minutes and almost the same number of slides, but I think are very valuable, having done this, been through this personally. I've been to battle and tried to figure out how to improve and navigate my career and help many others clinically, academically, and research careers as well. I do think that it is essential to learning these 4 things, which I'll get into and tell you about, to lead a fulfilled life, a better funded research program, and an accelerated academic career. So these 4 things, before I get to them though, we got to talk about why we're here. So why are we even talking about career resilience, and what the heck has it got to do with baseball? So this is Nolan Arenado. He has the highest batting average for the Rockies, which is pretty good. The Rockies are okay, but the fact is he's got the highest batting average. So what does baseball and resilience got to do with what I'm going to talk about and what we're going to share and what your careers are about? Well, in baseball, you can be excellent. So he has a batting average of about 321. He had one last year, which sounds high if you know about batting stats. But if you take back and step, if you don't know about batting stats, that means about 70% of the time he strikes out or misses the ball. So he actually gets it right about 30% of the time. That's exactly what an academic career is. You're going to not get that grant, not get that paper, not get that job, probably a majority of the time or a number of times. You want to make that number less when you miss, and the number that you hit those home runs higher. But if a baseball player in the quote big leagues can get it done at 30%, that's a lot what we do in medicine. Even when you see patients, you have a higher rate. You're probably 80, 90% when you're seeing whoever sees patients in this group. You're probably 80 or 90%. But when you're doing research and you're doing academic careers, you're going to miss quite a bit, and that's okay. And the important thing is how to get back and how to get after it after that. So it's such an important point when we know that career resilience is important. We look for this now. And this is in the business side as well as the career academic side. And there's a lot of alignment between business and academia at this time. But we know, and it's been several executives reported this out, is that at some point, if you don't have resilience, you'll become bored, burned out, or exhausted. And essentially quit or move on. And we don't want that. So we want to make sure you've got the right skills and or find people who have those skills. It's a career competencies. It's fundamental in academia and medicine or in business. And that's why even I, in my vice chair role, strategy and growth, I run recruitment for the department. So we actually look for candidates, specifically staff and faculty, who and assess their ability to deal with adversity or uncertainty. If they don't get that initial K word, are they going to be okay and reapply? If they don't make that K to R transition, are they going to be able to bounce back and apply to 3 other places? Or are they going to go, I can't do it. It's a system. They're beating me down. I can't, my team's not here. My staff isn't helping. My lab's not, nice enough. Or are they going to go after it and get after it and figure it out? And that's what we look for. It's fundamental. It's no longer a cliche of career resilience. It's what you have to do to get things done. And we look for it and we recruit for it, actually. So when we talk about resilience, before we get those 4 things, which I think are very important, there's a couple things I want you to really understand. As the basis of resilience is optimism. That's fundamental. So it's hard, people talk about resilience and adversity and grit and all these, cool words. But if you don't believe that if you fail and screw up or mess up or don't get it, that you're going to get it on the next time, if you don't have that optimism, you don't have resilience. And so you have to have that optimism. And if you don't, you need to move on to something else. So you have to believe or convince yourself that you can bounce back and get that funding or get that paper or get that job. And so most days we think the road looks like this. I got this. We got a high chance. Like the program officer said, it's awesome. The editor said, submit your paper. A boss said, she said, this is something I should apply for. But really, the road looks a lot like this. And if you've been through it enough, you've seen it. I know others have seen it. And you realize those experiments will not go well. You know that you're not going to get funded the first time, but the paper will get rejected twice. The data set will not be as clean as they told you. And those meetings will be more wasteful than you had planned and longer than they were supposed to be. The question is, how do you deal with it? Because that's what this road looks like every time. So these 4 things. So we're going to talk about these 4 pillars, these 4 things I think are valuable for career resilience. And then one, I'm going to tell you about a guy named Sebastian Junger, who's an author, New York Times author. We spent some time in the Oregon Valley. I'll talk about Michael Jordan and failing and how to fail and how to get better. We'll then talk about a guy named Jocko, we'll talk about how to pivot and how to move to new areas. And lastly, I'll talk about how to recharge and that's a fundamental piece of resilience in the workplace and outside, is that recharging aspect. There's 4 things in that recharging. Okay. All right, so let's talk about Sebastian Junger. So Sebastian Junger is a New York Times author. He's written several books. Perfect Storm was one. He's several National Geographic stories, video. Restrepo was another, and then written several books, including one named Tribe. And what he talks about in Tribe is finding your tribe, and this is very important for resilience. Part of the reason I came to the University of Colorado, I went to many places across the country, East Coast to West Coast, academia to industry, and I came here because I felt I found my tribe, and actually, luckily, was right. And finding your tribe means finding the people you connect with, finding the culture that you want to work with. What do they value? What do you value? Because if you're misaligned, you're not going to do well. You're not going to want to be there. You're not going to connect with your teams, and you're not going to find the mission that you want to align with. He's wrote a book about tribe. There's another book called Culture Code, which is very similar. Read them both, highlighted them, dog-eared them. They're phenomenal books. But they talk about something very similar, and that is finding your people. So in your area, and that can change. So if you're, in an early career state, researching something in women's health, And you find that those people that in Denver or wherever you go to just aren't right. So you can then pivot to another topic in women's health that is your people who align with you, who understand where you're going, who want to help you. It's very important to find that tribe, making sure they align with your mission. Your mission is a research mission potentially. Maybe it's a clinical research mission. You can't align with someone who's doing preclinical science or someone who doesn't understand research. You got to find those people and mission, two things we think are important. That they understand the fact about vulnerability. It's very important that in that team, that tribe that you're in, that you are working with, that they're going to make a mistake and you're going to make a mistake and you're going to screw up and you're going to misinterpret what they said. And that's okay. And you're going to do an after action and figure out how to move forward on the next grant. And those are the people there to help you. It's not a solo mission. It's a team sport, team mission. You got to find a group of people, that tribe around you, and you have to be able to trust them as well for those experiments. Trust they're going to get those edits back to you on time. Trust they know the contact or the collaborator that will help you move to the next level. And you have to have that personal connection. It's a little bit opaque, that connection. But those things, that tribe, those people are the one that's going to move you forward. That will build your resilience because they're your support network. They're the ones around you locally. That is going to help you. Okay. So in that same piece is also networking. We talk about your tribe with the people you work with every day. Most of them are local, but some might be remote. But in that sort of that broader group of people around, as you build this resilience, you got to have that network. Those women, those men that help you learn things faster. So whether it's in person, where you can strengthen your abilities, pivot and grow to their areas, collaborate on their grants as well and learn. Maybe it's virtually like Twitter and LinkedIn. If you watch COVID, Twitter has essentially been a platform to rapidly make decisions on care, some good, some bad. But for the most part, we didn't have time for publications. We had to get it out on social media and connect with people. And you saw people getting verified by Twitter and connecting across the country and world on COVID and COVID research, for example, and how it is a racial inequality piece and how it affects women's, especially in academic settings. But that networking is key, so you can share ideas quickly, learn from lessons that may not be your mentor, maybe a colleague, maybe a connection. But that network is very important. That's a foundation around beyond the local tribe that you develop and the culture you look for. That network builds your resilience. And with that, sharing your stories, and don't want to get too much into this, but you know, we always have issues when we deal with different parts of our career, and sharing those stories of pain, whether it's a patient who died under your care, whether it's a failed academic product that you put a lot of heart in, maybe it's a relationship at work with your boss or colleague that frayed because of the wrong reasons maybe. You want to share that, and the only way to share that and build that resilience is talking to other people about their experiences as well, how they handled it, and just getting them off your chest. So sharing your story in that network is key, in addition to building that tribe. The other piece about building that tribe is getting a good mentor and a good coach, and there are some differences between the two. So, you know, mentorship, I know you guys, there's a lot of programs on campus talk about mentorship, and I think you fully understand that if she's your mentor, she's going to get you through and make you, you know, what you want to do, give you guidance, share learned lessons for you, tell you when not to do something and when to do something. And that's very important. That builds resilience. Having that person say, I would not apply there. I don't trust that blank person. You know, you do this instead. I wouldn't apply to that journal. I wouldn't take that job. Do this instead. That's what a mentor does. A coach is a little bit a level up from a mentor, and they are actually an advocate. They're actually going to pull you up to that job. They're going to pull you into that grant. They're going to pull you into that paper. So there's a little bit of crossover between the two, but think of a coach as a more stronger advocate, and the mentor is more giving you guidance, more Yoda, and a coach being, more of a coach and sort of pulling you into those areas. It's a safe and open relationship. Typically, you challenge her, him, she challenges you, and that's okay. The one thing I would say with this relationship is you build that resilience and develop those mentors is using a few magic words. I've had a lot of folks not quite connect on the mentorship piece, mainly because they just use the wrong words, and they say, hey, can we have coffee next week? That's not enough to get them a relationship. You got to be overt about it and clear about it. And the magic words usually are very focused on recurring events and the need for mentorship. So instead of saying we're going to have coffee tomorrow, can we meet every month and can you be my mentor? Can we learn how to do X and can we meet regularly? Those are sort of the magic words to change their mindset versus, yeah, I'll have a casual conversation and give you my thoughts versus, oh, I see, we're going to engage in a relationship where I'm going to help you and be your mentor and coach. And so it's important that you use those magic words around, can we meet, can we meet again? And then, can you be my mentor, my coach? Can you help me solve this problem over time? That's really the difference as you build your team, your tribe, and your network. So that's the first lesson. So that was really around the four, building that team, that tribe, that network, that coach around you. It's important you find that for your resilience. If you don't, you'll be one individual, and I've seen it over and over on this campus, in my department, that they don't have that network, that team, that coach, that mentor, and they struggle until they find that, until they figure out they can't go in alone. Not in 2020, 2021, in academia, can you go in alone? You got to have that group around you to make you get there faster. Okay, second lesson. Learning to fail. I'll give you my perspective. I think some of you may have heard this generally, but this is fundamental to resilience. This is a fundamental quality about you and your career, and failing faster, success sooner. There's many ways to say this, but you've got to be able to pull yourself up off the ground after you fail. You're not a failure, but you're going to screw up and you're going to mess up, and I'll tell you about that here. So I do some coaching. I coach for many years, coach soccer and coach some other teams as well, from little kids on up, and been in sports myself and obviously in the military. And so I've been through this. And so, the quote that I like to use a lot, and I use it, and I've almost memorized it most days, I think the number's right, but Michael Jordan, and I know he's got that ESPN story, Last Dance, out right now, and there's some good and bad parts of Michael, but the short of it is there's some humility there. And what he says, he said it, he's got a lot of good quotes actually. He said, we talk about all his championships he's had, one of maybe the best basketball player of all time. Folks can debate that. But I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost over 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to make the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. And so as you look around, I see people, mentor folks, and I say you're gonna miss over and over again. You're not gonna get that thing funded. You're gonna have to try. You may get it funded the first time. You're awesome. Odds are you regress to the mean, like the rest of us, and have to apply over and over again. You'll take those jobs, you'll take those projects, you'll mess up, those experiments will not go well, but you'll learn from them. You pull yourself back up. You're a couple of sleepless nights, you beat yourself up, but you have self-compassion. You come back at it, and you go again, and that's very, very important. So let those failures ache, let them hurt, and then let them bring you back to the next best product or next best application, and that's actually very, very important. And they say if the road to success is paved with failure, I tell you what, man, it's got my name all over it. I have had more Barbarda Boulevard. I had more failures over the years, dumb mistakes I wouldn't go back and do again. Probably give folks a few dumb mistakes that they learn from as well. But I've definitely had my share. But sometimes you have to come at it, with sort of, as we say, all heart, no armor, and try again and again because you believe it's the right thing. And that's what I've shared with people as well. All heart, no armor, come back at it, make those mistakes. It's okay, but pick yourself up. Don't feel bad. We all do it. All right. In this lesson of learning to fail, there's two people here. Again, there's no audience. It's hard to get audience participation on Zoom, so I'll just talk through it. The person on the right is Theodore Roosevelt. The person on the left, if you don't know her, you should know her. She's phenomenal for his career. I'm sure Judy may know her personally. It's Brene Brown. So Brene Brown is a proud Longhorn from the University of Texas, who's now at University of Houston, has written many books around vulnerability, around shame, around resilience, and getting better. She's phenomenal and just a good person to read. And she's written several New York Times books around daring greatly, rising strong. Dare to Lead was her newest one. They're awesome. And she's a consultant to pro sports, business, academic leaders, actually even to kids and specifically young girls around building strength and avoiding shame. So what do they have to do to each other, and what do they got to do with this talk that we're talking about? So in 1910, Theodore Roosevelt gave us a big speech around being in the arena and being and fighting. Brene Brown, Dr. Brown, watched that speech a few years ago and actually built her career on it, about daring greatly, which is what she talked about. And I'll quote it, and then I want you to hear it from her words. So the quote is a little longer. I summarized it. And basically, Roosevelt said, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man or woman who points out how strong the man or woman stumbles. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust or sweat or blood, who comes short again and again, talking about failure, who at best knows at the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he or she fails daring greatly. So essentially, you got to get in there and you got to screw up and you got to mess up and you got to get in the arena to do well something big. So you can't be in the cheap seats, you got to be in the arena. So get in the arena and out of the cheap seats to show and make a difference. So I want you to hear it from her. And I'm gonna share this with you. I'm gonna pull up this video and let you listen to it for 2 minutes because she's awesome. And I'm going to ask if you can make sure you can hear this as it goes. And we'll start just a few seconds in. I think you can see this.
Theodore Roosevelt comes up and a quote comes up. And I read it, and this is what it says. It's a quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne, and a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech, and this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. The second thing, this is who I want to be. I want to create. I want to make things that didn't exist before I touched them. I want to show up and be seen in my work and in my life. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, If courage is a value that
Okay, I wanted to, I go thumbs up. Everybody could hear that. I'll go back to the share on the other side here. I can't see any comments, so if you got to give me a thumbs up or jump in verbally, because the way this is set up on that, I can only see me and you in my slides. So, so it's not, so get out of the arena, get in the arena, out of the cheap seats. It's okay to screw up and fail. Read her books, Daring Greatly, or her recent one, Dare to Lead. It's very important about this, and it's right on target for what we talk about with resilience, and kind of learning how to deal with this and learning how to fail. So this one is picture as the wing open. So this is the Air Force Academy. I went to the Air Force Academy, and this is where the best of the best every year they box. So I was a boxer as well. Air Force Academy has a great boxing team. Actually, 12 out of 14 years we're the NCAA Division I national champions. I was on that team for several years until I decided to go to med school. And then I actually decided that probably wasn't a great idea. And what we said is that in boxing, if you take it as a metaphor for life, there's several rounds, and having been, I was a little tall, so I had the advantage. I didn't get hit that often, but there were times that I did. Obviously, I got hit a lot, but that the first few rounds, you may not do well, and you may be set back, and then you've got to come back at the end, because you've got to win, either got to win the match or win the next several rounds. And so this is last year, actually, 2019, and these folks, and they actually just started a women's boxing team as well several years ago, which is awesome. Awesome for women. Anybody getting hit in the head is probably never good, but nonetheless, it is still a sport, and I try and keep it as safe as possible. But we said back then, and now it's become more common, is that the comeback is always better than the setback. So as you get set back in those first few rounds, you get set back in practice, running up Stanley's Canyon, up on the mountains there, that the comeback is always better. So make that comeback in your match, make that comeback in your rounds, make that comeback in the next practice, and win that, which we did often, but not always. And so that's very important. So I just remember that from years ago. It's kind of more a well-known reference now, but the comeback is always better than the setback. And that mentality of that, pull myself up, get after it. I screw up, I can still get after it, is the approach that we use typically. Okay, so that was the second. So we did tribe, learning at tribe, 2, learning to fail, and here are the other 2. So this is learning to pivot and learning to move around. And this is the third category we want to talk about. So learning to pivot, learning to evolve, learning to change direction, and the courage to do so. So when other people are moving this direction, you decide for your career, because you're passionate, because you're all heart, no armor, you can go after this, that you're going to move in a different direction that other people either are not seeing or not bold enough to do that. And you've got to be bold in 2020, 2025, this time. You got to take some risk to do it. And that builds resilience as well. Learning that you can change and pivot, and that's okay. If the masses are going in a different direction, that's okay. So this is Afghanistan. So we spent several times in Iraq. We went to Afghanistan, Bagram, Afghanistan, the biggest hospital and theater now. And then I led this as well. It was very important that we understood that a couple of things, and we were taught through this, through our leaders, and I learned this and share with others, that it is about being nimble in our very rigid environment. People think of the environment of the military being very rigid, actually quite nimble within it. Lots of innovation within it. You just don't take orders and say, yes, ma'am, and go on your way. You actually make changes. But to do that, you got to be bold. You got to be a vanguard. You got to be decisive. And when it's down, when it's snowing, when there's 35 patients coming at you, when there's 4 helicopters lined up like a traffic accident above the hospital, you have to embrace the suck. And we reiterate that. That means I'll just take it, say it's good, and move on. And so pivoting and being nimble, when we started out in war, we didn't know what we were doing. We had, and people, there were some books that were out there, but nobody was seeing what we were doing. The blown up, shot up, burned up service members that were taken care of. We had to create that. At the time, they said ER docs don't lead combat casualty care, surgeons do. I got a lot of great friends and surgeons I collaborate with. But I said, we're seeing the patients. We've got to be this. Now, in almost every part of policy across the DoD, emergency physicians help lead the policy for combat casualty care to change, and had to be bold and had to be very decisive in that. When I started my career, I was doing some preclinical work for the Air Force and decided I needed to move because that funding was going down. We pivoted toward an area called en route care research, which is transporting patients across the world or across the desert back home to San Antonio, Denver, VA, San Diego, Walter Reed. They said, oh, great, you can do that, but here's your cubicles. There's 1.5 FTEs. Good luck with that. We were nimble, we were bold, we were a vanguard, we were decisive. We embraced this very crappy space they gave us. We converted that 1.5 FTE. I turned it into 25 FTEs, 2 scientists, 3 program managers, and went from about $100,000 of external funds, extramural funds, to several million per year in about 3 years. So you have to sort of come at that. And we've done the same thing here with our Triad Center and our Combat Center, but you have to be nimble, you have to be decisive, you have to embrace all the suck as you go, and sort of pivot when you need to. And here is Jocko Willink. And I want to share this one more video here. So Jocko is a former SEAL. He was actually the commander for the SEAL Team 3 Task Unit Bruiser, one of the most, it's not as famous as Team 6, but Team 3. And now he does a lot of consulting for businesses and industry and executives and academic and healthcare hospitals. Silver Star and Bronze Star recipient. Wrote several New York Times selling books, Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, and talks about this. He talks about when things are getting bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. Get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go on the attack. And he's not talking about the military, he's talking about in your job, in your career, in your day. And just say good. Just say good, and then get after it. So I want you to hear it in his words. This is a very nice short video that describes how he would tell you the story, and it's good. It's very helpful, and it's been quoted quite a bit now. So let's go here.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on, and he'd say, "Boss, we got this and that and the other thing." And I'd look at him and I'd say, "Good." And finally one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem, and he said, "I already know what you're gonna say." And I said, "Well, what am I gonna say?" He said, "You're gonna say good." He said, "That's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say good." And I said, "Well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's gonna be some good that's gonna come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. You learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution." That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well, now you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
A little dramatic, I got it, but it gets home a good point about just pulling yourself off the ground. I've written several books about it and quoted across the country in many high executive areas, and it's very good. He's a character, but his points are well taken. You don't get funded, you don't get that job, you have to go and get after it. So part of this pivoting is getting after it, is getting up, pulling yourself up, learn to change, move in directions. We often say for a lot of researchers, you got to ride the horse you came in on. So if this is your topic that you're in, you've got to keep studying it and keep focusing on it. It's very important, especially subspecialize. But at the same time, as a career standpoint, we do say, and I think I lost this slide, so I apologize, that actually the resilient researchers don't come in on the horse, you don't ride the horse they came in on, but come in on a chariot of several horses. And that means several team members. That means aligned ideas. If you're studying, lung injury from ventilation, that you pivot a little bit to the left and right of that topic to where the funding might be, so that you can sustain your program over time. And that's pivoting. And you may come back to that original idea that you did your K award in or your first 2 papers in. But at the end of the day, it's not that one horse, the chariot of horses, those team members. You have one mentor, you have 3 others, and you can pivot to those other 3 if needed, depending on your career, your funding choices, if that other mentor moves. It's important to have a stable of options, not just the one, because that way you can pivot quickly. If you just, select down to one topic, one mentor only in this time frame, 2020, 2025, you could actually shoot yourself in the foot. You got to be ready to pivot around. And accept the obstacles that will change and happen. I said before, expect that experiment will not go well, that you will not get funded, that you will get rejected, and move through those obstacles. And COVID's a good example. If you look at the success we've had in COVID and the losses we've had in COVID, that's remarkable. And no one's living through a pandemic, so we don't know. We're literally going on the fly, but people have pivoted in this. People who have been working from home and been very productive. They've had remote meetings, and I've had 12 hours a day of remote meetings for many months, unless I'm working in the hospital, and have done quite well. Impact on academic careers, especially women's careers. There's been some evidence to say they have been less productive because of those demands at home and family, unfortunately. And we need to understand that, because this won't be our last pandemic. People pivot into virtual health and wearables where they hadn't gone there before. I think there's a little bit of background noise potentially. There's teleconsent for studies and trying to get those done. And this aspect of the emergency use authorizations and BARDA funding from the FDA, all those things came from people who pivoted from their normal research area and took advantage of the opportunity to reduce the impact of COVID in our lives. So that's pivoting is key. Okay, the last lesson here is about recharging and staying in shape. There's 4 pieces of this as well. And we'll go through this very simply. So we talk about pivoting, we talk about learning to fail, and now we're going to talk about recharging and staying in shape. And this is important for resilience as well. So in this area in particular, there are 4 things to do. One is around fitness, physical fitness. And I think there's a lot of evidence. I don't need to quote it for you, but is that physical fitness actually increases your ability to be productive. So there's fitness, mindfulness, sleep, and social family activities, but physical fitness particularly. So working out, let your body sustain the long hours that you're going to work with academically, the occasional lack of sleep that you're going to have, hopefully not a lot of lack of sleep, but some, the long desk time or standing desk time you're going to have. It improves cognition and focus. It's important for this physical strength is important for your career and mental resilience. They're linked, and science is that. So you may go out for a run on the trail. I may go out on the Peloton treadmill and have Rebecca kick my butt for 45 minutes, whatever works for you. It's very important you take a break get out of the office, off the desk, and get out on the trail and work out, and that physical piece. The second piece is around sort of mental strength as well. And this has been about mindfulness. There's a lot of resources on campus, a couple of great talks that were given by psychiatry recently. And mindfulness, and there's many apps out there, but in my mind, it's not the app, it's the attitude. So if you really, mindfulness is not about listening to Headspace or Calm, which are great ones, or Waking Up, which I like. It's actually about saying, I'm going to do this to help increase my focus and make me more academically productive, because scientifically that works. I'm going to be less emotionally charged through mindfulness, which reduces my ups and downs and helps me with my relationships and team building, which works scientifically as well, and helps me be present for those lab meetings that can really be creative versus looking at my iPhone, looking outside, looking at the lab meeting, checking my email all at the same time, which is not productive. So this is very important, reduces stress as well and build your resilience. So physical fitness, mental fitness with mindfulness. And again, it's not the app, it's the attitude. And then sleep is the third one. And so I was definitely a 4-hour a night person with a 15-minute cat nap through the day for about 20 plus years. And I was quite productive academically, quite productive, probably leading the group. I realized, and the science showed it's not a great idea. Went over now, sleeping 7 hours. We had our most productive academic year since we've been doing that on publications, and have almost doubled our funding. So I'm not saying it's just sleep alone. I'm just saying it's an important component of it, and that is scientifically based as well. So physical, mental, and sleep. Get those 7 hours. Search those articles. They're there. The evidence is clear. And lastly is the 4 pieces around recharging is family. So I work at every day, and connecting with family or friends and making those adjustments to be with them. That is really recharges the soul, keeps you focused. And frankly, if you're not, when you look at candidates, if they don't have an outside focus or outside sort of system that groups them, we have some concerns, because the academic life can be rough. They need to have a little bit of focus outside, family, friends, some connection to make them more resilient. So when they get kicked down from those grants and publications or job workload, they have someone to bounce off of. So physical, mental, sleep, and then the social aspect through family. So be present, find hobbies, invest in your kids' time, because one day they're going to be gone, or your family's time as well if you don't have kids. And the joke we use typically with this is that, the military, a lot of these generals and physicians and CMOs have these remarkable offices, and they have these great offices, and they're proud of them. They're decorated with all these war memorabilia and their family and everything, and beautiful windows, and they're famous leaders, and some that are, you've heard about in the news recently, had a chance to work with them. But here's what's interesting. For 20-something years, the moment they leave, the moment they retire and leave that job, the first question people ask, they don't ask who's that great woman, that general, that she was there, or he. What they say is, hey, whose office was that? Can I take that furniture? Can I take that desk? Can I get this view? In a moment, they have no idea that person spent 20, 30 years in that office. But who does care, is your family and your close friends. And if you have kids, they care, and they'll care for the next 20 plus years. So it's important that in your career resilience, that you also focus on stuff outside the office, away from Zoom, away from the locations, because that will be your long game. And it's easy to get wrapped up in the first few years, but your long game is reaching out to those folks and connecting with them. And we say it's work-life harmony. I don't think it's work-life balance, because balance, as you look at the definitions, equal distribution, it's not balance. You can't do 50-50, 30-30. And a lot of folks, it's very challenging for men and women, mothers and fathers, for this. So it's work-life harmony. What's the amount of work in each that makes you fulfilled? 70-30, 80-20 this week, 90-10 next week, whatever it is. What's your family need from you? That's what it is. Not balance, but harmony. And last person I'll share with you is, this is Admiral 4-star McRaven, Navy SEAL. He led Bin Laden raid, worked with Obama. He was after he retired, he was a UT, University of Texas System Chancellor for several years, New York Times author of Make Your Bed, which is a great book, short book, and he did the MIT commencement this year. He's a hero in my mind, and I've never had a chance to meet him. I'd love to, but he has a few things to say. And one, in his commencement this year to MIT, he said, only the most resolute, the ones that persevere through failure, the rejection, the ridicule, and the emotion and physical strain over time will save the world. He talks about a hero analogy in his speech. And this is a SEAL talking about being ridiculed and emotionally and physically strained. These are the same things we do in our academic careers. These are the same things we need to focus on for our resilience to get better. And the last note is that while we talked about those 4 pillars of adversity and building resilience, there are a lot of extra places of adversity as well. With women, the Me Too and Time's Up movement, with racial disparities, with Black Lives Matter, with immigrants and other inequalities and discrimination, and in COVID, on top of all of those things, are more adversity that we had ever expected. And all these groups have adversity that they didn't ask for, they didn't want. And even for me, who had a grandmother who was one of the first female mayors in India, had a mother who was one of the first Indian American academic executives. She's 82 now. 2 strong daughters who were going to be emotionally stronger than I am, and a wife who's smarter than I am and definitely stronger than I am as well. I still had to learn and listen about some of these topics as well. And our immigrants who have a young student who was a Vietnamese refugee, lived 5 people in 1 bedroom in Aurora, mother worked for a dry cleaning business. He then didn't have the opportunity to go to private schools, even though he got into Princeton and Yale, but went to a public school. He surely didn't have a chance to do college tours, excelled in college, got into med school, excelled in med school, went to residencies, one of the top physicians actually going to be in the military because he needed the funding for college or med school, and is going to be a research fellow there. Remarkable adversity that none of us would ever know. So it's time for us to make sure we listen and learn about these areas of adversity that we're not familiar with, if we're not, but understand a lot of folks don't have the resources that most of us do, don't have the opportunities and privilege that all of us do. So to wrap it up, we talked about 4 pillars we think are important. The tribe, talked about Sebastian Junger and Kurgan Valley and how connections and tribe and mentors are important for your resilience. We talked about failing and Brene Brown and how you got to be in the arena and not in the cheap seats and take those risks. And Michael Jordan's quote about missing all the shots that he internalizes, even though he's won so many championships. We talked about learning to pivot and change, and talk about Jocko and how you've got to just say, good, and just move on with that. And finally, the part of resilience is around recharging, which is, physically blends into your mental, which is your mindfulness, blends into your social and physical, and then your family piece as well, and getting 7 hours of sleep a night. And that really matters a lot for you to be more resilient through this. It's scientifically focused that without that sleep, you're less resilient. Good. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions coming near the end. So, or any stories at all. And I'll stop sharing my screen. I see there's a couple of chats here. I have the quote up in my office. Great. And then, good. Excellent. Good. Thanks.
So this is Melanie. And that was excellent. I think my question is, when do you decide to make an exit strategy? Because at some point, in terms of trying to harmonize between family and work, or the number of challenges just become futile. Kind of where, do you have any thoughts on where that exit strategy is? Because certainly some things end and people make major changes.
You got it. So the question is around an exit strategy. And I would say it's more around pivoting. That may be an exit strategy at that time. You may pivot away from X to Y. And I would say that, have you tried to bounce back from whatever adversity that you're dealing with? And do you have the team around you to do that? And is there other personal commitments that do not allow you to engage as well? If all those things are negative, maybe it's the right time for me to move in a different direction. And we say, you got to find, I interview people, I ask them, what makes you fulfilled when we interview folks? In addition to asking about uncertainty and adversity, to try and find that. And you got to sort of spend some time, and maybe it's through some personal time alone. Is what you're doing making you fulfilled despite some losses you've had, despite some failures? Are you still fulfilled? And if you're not, it may be more about pivoting than about exit strategy. Kind of like about failing versus being a failure. It's just about changing and taking what you have with you. It's a great question, though.
Perfect. Thank you.
What other questions do you have?
Well, I'll ask one. As you put up your 4 things, I kind of went through and thought, how am I doing on each of those? Whether I'm able to pivot, whether I'm recharging, whether I'm spending time identifying and working with my tribe. And I don't grade myself very well on a few of them. And wondering if you had thoughts on maybe how to build a plan around it, or how to think through some of those changes that we might want to or think that we should make.
Yeah, good question. So, how do you score yourself on these and do them? And I tell you a couple things. One, I do poorly on most and try and getting better, which is part of the reason I think we're all here today and we're talking about this, is that because we think we need to improve, because we think we need to learn, is why we're actually, those are folks, and your colleagues, the ones that are actually trying to learn, that are humble and trying to get better, are the ones actually probably in the better category. What is tricky, though, is to tackle all 4 at one time. And so I do think it's very important, even in the recharging, there's 4 things there. And so you got to take one at a time and set yourself up with that. You got to journal to it. You got to focus on it for 3 weeks and try and get some level of competency, and then move to the next. The mistake people make with anything, whether it's writing 5 papers at one time or submitting 3 grants or taking on this, is they try and go after all 4 as this example, and they will fail. But to pick one, go after it, get to a certain level of confidence, go on to the next one, odds are you'll come back and improve over time, and it continues over years, and that's okay. And that's okay as far as getting after that.
One other question, and I apologize if I'm monopolizing the questions, but you named a number of books. I wrote down the ones around the tribe, The Perfect Storm, Culture Code. I also, I've read a lot of Brene Brown. I'm familiar with her stuff, but if you were to list 2 or 3, what would be your top books? And if you want to follow up with that, but I would just help me narrow the list.
Yeah, I think Culture Code is a phenomenal one. That Culture Code and Tribe probably are good synopsis for that whole concept around that. Then I think Brene Brown's, I'd love to be able to meet her one day, but she's awesome. So she, I think Daring Greatly, and then the leadership, but the one she just wrote about daring, I got them back here, so I want to look back.
Yeah, I actually just read that one.
Yes.
The center, we talk a lot about the whole, it's not about being right, but getting it right. That was one of her quotes from that book that I loved.
That's right. Yeah. She talks about having courage over comfort as well. which is hard. It's very, yeah, she's just spunky. I like her. And then around the the Admiral McCraven, or Dr. McCraven, he talks about a lot of good things. He has a book, I'm not sure if it really gets at what we're talking about, but called Make Your Bed. He has a wonderful speech he gave at the University of Texas commencements on YouTube. It's been viewed like 6 million times. And McCraven just sort of talks about some of the things about failing and his, as a SEAL and training. And so he gives that example that's been used many times by other people. So that's a nice short, the book is probably 100 pages. It essentially has a synopsis of his UT speech. Let me think about a couple of others that I could share about that to really go. And I will say we're talking about mindfulness, that a lot of folks use heads up and calm and the famous ones. Waking up is less famous, and the gentleman that authored, he's a neuroscientist. It's very science-based, but it's also very good app to use. It's not as flashy as some of the other ones. It's well known. It's top 20 or top 30 apps. There's like 120 out there. But Waking Up is good. He's a neuroscientist. I feel like we connect sometimes academically when he talks about certain aspects of that. But I'll think of a couple others, and I'll share those as well, in particular. I see a couple of home crowd, Dr. Perman and Dr. Libby there, so thanks for coming in. Oh,
Nan, you're on mute.
Yeah. I think you're on mute.
Nan, you're on mute. Nan. There you go.
Thank you so much for the training. Excellent training. All learned enormous amount, and we'll be sending out an evaluation. So please take a little time to complete that. We appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And our next one also that's coming up. When is our next one?
The next one is actually Carrie Moreau is going to lead it July 29th. And it's the K to R transition.
Awesome. Dr. Babarda, thank you so much. I guarantee you there was much more reaction and appreciation than what you're able to see training.
Yeah, as you said at the beginning, before you all came on, we were talking, and Ann and Jen, I was saying how I've learned two things from COVID. One, that I like to talk with people in person. I engage that and speak in person. That energy is good for me. And two, I don't like to stand in front of Zoom for 12 hours, but that's two things I've learned about myself over the last 3 or 4 months. But so thank you for taking the time. Obviously, the center is a wonderful organization. I'm lucky to know some folks in it, and Judy and Ann and the other folks, Sarah and others. And so thanks for letting me share some thoughts on it. It's an important topic.
Thank you.
Take
care, everyone.
Take care.